like to begin today's program to honor Arthur Dulong. I also just wanted to thank all of the volunteers who helped us pull together this reception this afternoon. Many people were involved, but I particularly want to thank Louisa Coleman. And in fact, we do have a token of appreciation, a small gift from the Parents Association for Louisa. I also now just want to introduce Mr. Henry Damon, longtime colleague here at CCHS, who will be our Master of Ceremonies, and he will conduct the remainder of the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. It's a real pleasure for me to be here this afternoon in this tribute for a wonderful educator as he's leaving CCHS and education. Before we get started with the formal part of the program, I would like to introduce members of Art's family that are able to be with us here this afternoon. Art's wife, Karen. Art's daughter, Kristen. I understand that Art's son, Tom, is going to try to join us a little later this afternoon, and hopefully he will make it. Art's mother-in-law, Mrs. Feely. She's been given a special assignment to keep him in line today. And Art's granddaughters, Emily and Annie. Now I'd like to move right to asking CCHS athletes to please come in for their presentation. There we go, good. Come on up. Yep. You'll need to use the microphone. Sure, come on.
Just on behalf of all the athletes, we'd like to thank Mr. Dulong for his years of service. So thank you.
And I was going to make a poster, I just didn't have time, that said, Principal Dulong puts the pal in principal, because I think he's a great guy and good friend.
Awesome. I'm not on the program, so I'm not going to speak, but I do want to say thank you very much, and I've enjoyed every minute of watching every sport that I get a chance to watch. I wish that the job was structured so that every afternoon between 4 and 6, I was able to watch every sport that was going on. I really love them. But you guys are great, and thank you very, very much for this this honor of getting some, the hats and the athletic jacket and so forth. Thank you.
Athletes, thank you. I know many of you are under a deadline to get the buses to get off to events this afternoon. Many of you also know that Mr. Dulong himself was a star athlete in high school and has certainly been a big supporter of athletics. He was also a longtime coach, and that commitment certainly played itself out through his time here as a principal as well. So again, thank you for all that support, Mr. Dulong, for the athletes. I'd like to ask Maddie Haft to come up now and make a presentation from the Student Senate.
Oh, wait. Welcome. As I look around today at all of the parents, faculty, and fellow students, I realize that we all have one thing in common: a feeling of gratitude towards our retiring principal. We are all here today to celebrate the dedication of Mr. Dulong. One thing that I feel really distinguishes our principal is his ability to make personal connections with the majority of the student body. I remember at one of the first football games my freshman year, I passed by him. Although I was one of over 100 students watching the game in the end zone, Mr. Dulong recognized me and greeted me by name. This became the norm throughout my high school career. That is, until my senior year when I became the moderator of the Student Senate. As moderator, I was in charge of setting up presentations with the faculty chairs and many, many meetings with Mr. Dulong. Towards the third quarter, my personal greeting morphed into, and I quote, "Oh, it's you again." But don't worry, I didn't let this get me down, because each jesting remark was always followed by a wink. And when I literally had to chase him down the hallway to get his attention, I knew that this record-holding runner wasn't really sprinting his fastest. In fact, I truly appreciate how supportive Mr. Dulong has been of our student initiatives. From tolerating all of our various Senate endeavors to supporting us from day one of organizing Challenge Day, Mr. Dulong's trust in the student body has pushed us to be more responsible for our environment, our peers, and ourselves. His willingness to work with the students to solve problems in school has helped to create the feelings of mutual respect. I therefore am honored to present this gift from the Student Senate as a thank you to our devoted and patient principal.
God, that's beautiful. Just for your benefit, I'll read the inscription, I guess for my benefit too. Dulong, I know some of you call me that, without the mister or whatever, but that's okay. Dulong, beloved principal, thank you 1,262 times over. And that's sweet. Thank you very much. It's beautiful. Thanks very much. Where's the Student Senate get the money?
Now, there's some questions you don't want to ask, Art.
I know.
I'd now like to ask Alan Weinstein to come forward to present our next part of the program.
Hello, everybody. It would be kind of foolhardy for me to say too much today because the other night, Thursday, Karen Bushy was as eloquent as one could be speaking about art. But I do want to say a couple things, and then Bob has to get on a bus, so I'll be quick. I really think we all have to pity the poor son of a gun who has to replace Art Dulong. I'm sure glad it's not me. You know, for this occasion, I had asked teachers to fill out a quarterly improvement plan on art, and I didn't get anything back. I realized that teachers might have resented the fact that they were asked to simply check boxes on that form, which may have been a little demeaning to Art, or they may have been waiting for Art to actually fill out his own plan for improvement. Or maybe there just wasn't that much to improve upon. Art Dulong makes everything look incredibly easy. He handles stress as effectively as anyone I've ever worked with. He's a diligent worker, He does not delegate anything that he can do himself, thereby setting a great example for the rest of us. He's one of the most effective listeners I've ever worked with as well. Since he's totally accessible, I think everybody in the school is able to get time with him and leaves his office feeling as though Art has heard his or her concerns. In the 4 years that I've worked with Art, I've asked him many questions ranging from legal issues to discipline, to scheduling, to track and field. I actually wanted to know the answers to most of these questions, but I also wanted to know if he knew the answers to the others. He always did. I think the only question he didn't answer fully was the one I really didn't have to ask him, and that was why he wanted to be the principal of Concord Carlisle. My answer to that question is because CCHS could really not have had a better principal these past 6 years. I truly feel fortunate to have worked alongside Art Dulong. Pity all of us, frankly, going forward without his leadership, his knowledge, his skills, and his sense of humor. I'm sure in the future we'll all be asking, what would Art do? Finally, we would like to express some similar sentiments in a song that we've barely prepared for this occasion. I really don't think anyone will confuse this with art, so to speak. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're calling the No Town sound today.
Hello? 1, 2. Hey!
I think that should be played on the morning announcements sometime soon.
I hope.
Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Ethan Hoblitzel, Vice President of the Concord-Carlisle Teachers Association. Ethan?
You ready? That's an awfully difficult act to follow, I have to say. As most of you can tell by now, Mr. Uhas, who's the president of the union, isn't here today, so that means the task falls to me. I think he realized right off the bat that if you were at the retirement dinner, about a quarter of you were there, but if you were there and you heard Miss Bushy talk about Mr. Dulong in the witty and inimitable way that she did, that also was an impossible act to follow, and I think that Mr. Uhas realized that he ought to just opt out on that. I tried to get Ms. Glazier to do this because she's the incoming vice president of the CCTA, but I couldn't arrange the elections to occur before June 1st, so it falls on me. Usually the role of a vice president, as you all know if you study history, is to keep breathing, or if you're Dick Cheney, the role of the vice president is to keep your pacemaker going. But sometimes it falls on the vice president to speak or appear at the funerals of foreign dignitaries. I think there is a reason why vice presidents are not asked to speak on these occasions. But that doesn't really solve my dilemma here. How to recognize Mr. Dulong and all he's done for the school for the past 6 years. Not knowing how to proceed, I thought I would follow his example. I realized this morning unknowingly when I was sitting next to Mr. Lane in the social studies department, and he said, "Hey, isn't there something happening for Dulong this afternoon? Who's speaking anyway?" I was. All of a sudden, I realized exactly how Mr. Dulong feels going to faculty meeting, except for he usually thinks about what he's going to say about the time he leaves his office, and I at least had a free period to put my thoughts together. Unfortunately, he does a better job with the 2 minutes it takes him to get to the library than I can do with 30 minutes and a piece of paper, but such is life. So I figured I'd copy the example of the master. What does Mr. Dulong do when faced with a task of just speaking off the cuff? I thought I would start with 15 minutes of recognitions. That's only funny if you've ever been to a faculty meeting. But I'd like to start off by recognizing Mr. Dulong's mother, his daughter, his grandchildren, the faculty from Lexington, his teammates. I could go on, by the way, for another 15 minutes if we were going to really do this right. But I'd start off with recognitions. While I was going along, I'd make a few self-deprecating jokes. I'd make some comment about how today's attendance, finally a school meeting where everybody shows up. It has to take him to the opportunity to leave before this actually happens. But in all seriousness, I think today is a time for us to reflect on what Mr. Dulong has done for the school and for us, the faculty, during his tenure here. I think Mr. Dulong explained it best at the retirement dinner when he said he always put students first, and that what he was most proud of in his professional career was his contributions as a classroom teacher. From what I saw of Mr. Dulong's leadership of the school, this emphasis on teaching was always apparent. He sometimes hid this behind jokes that he was more comfortable on the track than in the library, but when it came to apprehending drunk students at dances, it's clear that his speed sometimes came in handy. It helps to run a school when you can actually run after students and catch them from time to time, which is more than most of us can say. If you think of Mr. Dulong as a coach, it's obvious his job here has been a difficult one. We, and by we here I'm speaking of the faculty, are not an easy team to manage. We have a fairly healthy collective sense of ego. We don't follow directions particularly well. We like to argue, or in social studies we call it debating, whenever the manager does something we don't like, which by definition is just about anything. But Mr. Dulong was always the consummate statesman. He'd listen attentively to your complaints, ignore them, then charm you into accepting that he was just not going to be pushed around and that really what he was thinking was the right thing anyway. There's no higher accomplishment than getting a large number of stubborn people to do things they don't want to do. And Mr. Dulong was always able to do this with a light touch and humor. Our principal is a player's coach. Think of how many times he encouraged us, praised us, thanked us, backed us up when things became difficult. I know Mr. Dulong sometimes felt trapped in his office, and much of the time he was fielding complaints and shielding us from issues we never had to deal with because he did it for us. As teachers, we all know that we do our best work when we are not distracted by unreasonable parent complaints or community demands or administrative fiats, and Mr. Dulong protected us from all of these things, and he did it beautifully. In many cases, the job of a principal is to do the dirty work so we don't have to. And Mr. Dulong did this as gracefully, skillfully, and wisely as anyone I have ever worked for. None of us should take that for granted. To follow the sports analogy, Mr. Dulong also went to bat for us when needed. During our last difficult contract negotiation, our fearless leader wrote a forceful letter about the skills and professionalism of high school teachers. Granted, it was full of lies and hyperbole, but Mr. Dulong had our backs and spoke up on our behalf when it was needed. We don't forget this. One of the signs of leadership is the loyalty a leader engenders in his team. The fact that Mr. Dulong was the first non-CCTA member ever honored at our retirement dinner speaks volumes about how we view what he has done for us, both as a faculty and as a union. But despite Mr. Dulong's publicly stated aversion for libraries, and I always found it funny that he always said that he stayed away from the library at Holy Cross, given the fact that maybe he had some premonition that later in his professional career the library might be a source of purgatory for him. That's where the faculty meetings were, by the way. He also had a clear vision of what his educational priorities were. Mr. Dulong forced us to consider that there is more to school than the classroom experience. His emphasis on the importance of sports and after-school activities was a plea for all of us to think about school in broader terms. Under his tenure, the number of clubs has grown enormously, and he has recognized students from a very large variety of different groups for their contributions, publicly and in the hallways every day. He always asked us how we could get disenfranchised students active in the life of the school and asked us to think in broad terms about what it meant to be part of a school community. All of us are sad to see Mr. Dulong go. In a relatively short period of time, he has put his stamp on this high school, and that is not an easy thing to do. His legacy will include monsoon graduations, first-class stand-up routines, and letters to parents describing exactly what grinding is. You really had to read it to believe it. But more importantly, Mr. Dulong will be remembered for his fair, sensitive, and people-friendly leadership style. He has brought peace and prosperity to his kingdom. He has ruled over a pax concordata, if you excuse the history analogy. He has been good to his people, all of his people. So, hail Principal Dulong.
Thank you, Ethan. I'd now like to ask Carolyn Higgins, representing parent groups at CCHS, to come forward.
It is my honor and privilege to be able to say thank you to Art on behalf of all the parents of the CCHS students. As someone who has been a CCHS parent for 8 years, and let me assure you that spanned 2 children who didn't overlap, I am fortunate to be able to speak from the vantage point of having been here throughout Art's tenure. If we were to do a random poll of parents and ask them what qualities they would wish for in a high school principal, I think you'd come out with a composite picture describing Art to a T. Firm, fair, direct, thoughtful, caring, understanding, with endless energy and a wonderful sense of humor. He has been deeply committed to our children and cared equally about providing an outstanding education, a wealth of extracurricular activities, and the emotional and social support they needed to steer them through the turbulent teenage years. He was always available to parents in individual meetings and in his monthly coffees. He was there to explain the big picture and all the major issues and to make sure that every personal request was addressed. One of my favorite stories about Art was something that happened at a parent coffee. One parent was upset at the amount of disruption that had occurred one year for her child because of a number of pregnant teachers. Art expressed his empathy, but he was quick to point out that it wasn't his fault. Art was always at functions, meetings, sports events, and he took all the necessary steps, including walking the catwalk at the Step Club fashion show, for example, to show his support. But one of the things that many of us most admired about Art is his courage and directness, especially in his newsletters and emails, particularly when he was dealing with sensitive or upsetting issues. He always explained what was happening and his point of view in a very understandable way and with total honesty and empathy. In thanking Art, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in his case, as is so often true, behind every good man there are a dozen or more women. And for Art, they include his family, as well as Louisa, and all the other administrative staff who keep this school running so effortlessly and smoothly. Thanks to all of you for your impressive teamwork and your contributions. Our sincere best wishes go with you, Art, for a fulfilling and relaxing retirement. And don't forget your friends here at CCHS, because we won't forget you. On behalf of the parents, I would like to present Art with a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'd like to introduce Brenda Finn, who's the superintendent of the Concord and Concord-Carlisle school districts. Brenda.
Has told me from time to time that I didn't have a leg to stand on with some of my comments. That literally is true today. But I'd just like to say to you people how wonderful that you've created this amazing tribute for him, a man we all admire and have grown to love. So thank you for that. I'd just like to say a few words on behalf of all of us at the district in regard to Art. Some people were born to be extraordinary educational leaders, always focusing on doing what's right for students. They build and support a community of learners. They assist colleagues in becoming stronger educators. They focus on the positive, and they promote program in the process. Principal Arthur Dulong is such an educator and leader. Mr. Dulong has demonstrated in his life and in his work what it means to serve with intelligence, integrity, humor, an unbelievable work ethic, kindness, common sense, and the common touch. High school principals are always running, so it's fortunate that ours has been a runner throughout his life, able to go the distance, able to sprint in an emergency, able to leap entire buildings in a single bound, and land standing. He's a dedicated team player, always supporting his fellow teachers and administrators. He's a distance runner, having the stamina and the courage to make the tough choices, sometimes alone, and communicate these compassionately. If he's not as speedy as he might have been 4 decades ago, I bet he's wiser, more balanced. And this is part of what makes him an outstanding principal. His ability to balance the diverse needs of a high school, focusing first on students and simultaneously trying to work respectfully with teachers, with support staff, parents, central office, the press, the larger community, and anyone who tugs on his time. It's been a distinct honor and a pleasure to have served beside Art as a colleague. He's enlivened our administrative table. A master of storytelling, he's kept us laughing. A 37-year seasoned educator, he's informed our practice. Since we both served as high school principals, we've shared tales from the trenches. Art's story now leads him to the next race, or perhaps the next stroll or saunter in his life. Our hearts and deepest gratefulness go with him. Mr. Dulong, thanks for the memories, for your leadership, for being a caring colleague, an effective leader, and a decent, thoughtful human being who has made a positive difference in our schools and in our lives. We will miss you, Art.
Thank you, Brenda. Art said he wasn't on the program, and maybe he didn't know that he is, but I'm going to put him on the spot for one last time. He's not going to get out of 37 years of education without at least one good surprise. And call on him to use his impromptu skills in whatever way he wishes to close out this tribute to 37 years from an outstanding educator.
Thank you, Henry. Well, I got a kick out of these musicians, particularly these. I got a kick out of the orchestra, but I know that they're well practiced, well rehearsed, and they're actually skilled. And this group here never has so little talent gone to waste. But I did appreciate the song. I really did, because that's the song that all the girls in my high school used to sing to me all the time. Yeah, right. But, and I want to, first of all, truly thank the folks who put this together. And I know Carolyn was a piece of that, and I know Louisa was a huge piece of that. And I believe all of the other women in the front office were very much instrumental into it. I want to inform all of them. Carolyn can go back to work whenever she chooses. The rest of them need to go back to work tomorrow. I don't know where they found time to organize what I see in front of me. I certainly will be eternally grateful for them being so thoughtful and so organized and so wonderful to have even thought of such a thing. I said to Louisa this morning, I said, you know, Louisa, I don't know too much about whatever it is you've got planned for this afternoon, but I don't know who's going to be more disappointed when only 2 or 3 people show up, you or me. But I have to tell you, I really have quite struck and stunned and somewhat flabbergasted by the display this afternoon and the number of people who took time out of their day to come down. It's been said 37 years, and I guess that as the joke goes, you know, I've enjoyed 25 great years of work. But no, it's been 37 years, and I have to tell you the truth, honestly, it's gone by in a snap. It absolutely has gone by in a snap. I've been so privileged to work in 2 wonderful places, and I know some of the people in Concord get upset when I talk about my other life before I got here. It's kind of like, you know, little kids can't imagine their parents being alive before they were there too, but it's kind of like a lot of the people here can't imagine that I was alive before I got here, but I was. The 37 years have really been wonderful, wonderful years. I remember my first interview, and I've told this story a number of times, it's going to be a very short story here, but my first interview, I met with the assistant superintendent of schools in Lexington, and at that time there were a lot of jobs available. And he sat down and he talked to me and he said, well, he said, based on your transcripts for your young people, by the way, you didn't used to have all of what you need now in order to get a job. He said, based on your transcripts, you could teach English, social studies, or math. Which one would you prefer? Well, to me, math was always pretty easy, so I said, I'll take math. Sounds good. And then he said, and we need people at both the junior high school and the high school. Which one would you prefer? Well, since one of my very best friends at Holy Cross was at that point in time dating a senior at Lexington High School, I said, I don't think I want to go to Lexington High School. I'll take the junior high. Okay, he said, that's fine. He said, now if we do hire you, how long do you think you'll stay? Being naive, I guess, I said, 5 years tops. But he hired me. They had a real need. They actually hired 17 math teachers. I think if you could breathe and you could spell math, they took you that year. But I did enjoy, and for the sake of some people who don't know, I know a lot of people know, I spent 5 years teaching 7th grade mathematics at that junior high school. I spent 4 more years teaching 9th grade mathematics. I spent a couple of years traveling between. And then from about 1981 on, I spent all of my time at Lexington High School up until 2001. And during that time, I was a math teacher. I was a coach, of course, for 20-plus years. I was also what we called a housemaster, and I was an assistant principal, a department chair of mathematics. I had a lot of different roles. Obviously, I'm easily bored. But I've enjoyed it all the way along. And Henry mentioned that today would be a surprise, and in fact it is. But the biggest surprise in my 37 years was when Ed Mavericks, superintendent of Concord, called me up and said he was offering me the job. Never in my life did I dream I'd get that job. My wife Karen could tell you, I was just sitting around one morning on a Sunday morning and said, hey, there's a job over at Concord Carlisle. She said, so? She said, you've got a job. I said, well, that's true. I said, I'm just thinking about it, that's all. She said, so? And just about the time I got it, I had to tell her I actually applied. But I certainly am just overjoyed that I took that job. Concord Carlisle High School is absolutely a fabulous, fabulous place. I loved Lexington, I really did. I loved the students at Lexington, I really did. I loved some of the teachers at Lexington, I really did. Here at Concord, I really have loved everyone I've come in contact with. I have said to many, many people, including some of my friends at Lexington, you know, what's the difference between Lexington and Concord? Well, for me, the real difference is that the students at Concord are qualitatively different. It's a better group of kids. I love the students at Concord. And they're just so wonderful in everything they bring. The teachers, absolutely. This is a terrific teaching staff. But honestly, I've spent my entire career with terrific teaching staff. This is a terrific teaching staff. It's probably the best in the state. It's wonderful. I've enjoyed working here. I enjoyed Ethan's words about, what was the words? Highly principled, determined, whatever. Stubborn is the word that comes to mind sometimes, but skilled, knowledgeable, committed to students, committed to do the right thing for education and for this school. Boy, you just can't get past it. And then the parents, every time I get an opportunity, I have to thank parents for all that they've done for the school while I've been here. If you see flowers planted any place on the campus, some parent did that. If you see bushes trimmed, a lot of the times the parents were the ones who were doing that. And whenever we put on any event, regardless of what it is, including today, by the way, the parents are very heavily involved in that. No parents any place in the state are more committed to making the school a wonderful place. And so people often say to me, well, what do you do? I don't know. All I know is whatever my job is, I make it look a lot harder than it ought to be. But I've done my best. I've tried. And I think it's time for me to go take a little bit of a rest for some short period of time, hopefully a short period of time. I don't envision a rocking chair for the next 35, 40 years, but it is time to take a rest, to kind of sit back and think about where I'd like to go at this point in my career, what I'd like to do, and hopefully after several months of contemplating and reading and sitting, and at some point I have no doubt that Karen will tell me, get off your butt and do something. I will be making some choices about some future direction. And along the way, of course, I don't know where one of my two best friends are here, Emily and Annie. Emily's my 5-year-old best friend, and Annie's my 2-year-old best friend. I'm not sure where Annie went to, but she sometimes likes to move. But I do anticipate spending lots more time with Emily and Annie. That's really the joy of my time, the joy of my life at this particular moment in my life, and I love every minute I get to spend with them. And of course, I will enjoy spending a lot more time with my wife, Karen. As some of you are aware, the principal job can sometimes take up a few evenings. Every evening last week, first 2 evenings this week, and then, of course, there's maybe the Art Association tomorrow night, little things. There's always something to do because there's so many people to support. And I love doing it, I truly do. But on the other hand, I often feel somewhat guilty for neglecting Karen, who's stood by me through everything I've done, through all the time I've spent, and just been rock solid in her support of all the decisions I've made and all of what I've tried to do along the way. And of course, my mother-in-law, Dot Feely, she flew up from Florida to get a piece of cake and maybe a cookie. But Dot flew up from Florida a few days ago, and I can't believe how she would do that. It's just wonderful for her to do that. And I see my son Tom just walked in. He's the handsome guy with the more balding hair than I have. At least it's a contest. I don't know if it's more, but and I had the great pleasure just past weekend to attend a graduation ceremony for Tom getting his MBA degree. And my daughter Kristen, who just stepped out and stepped back, I don't know where she went to, but oh, there she is in the back. My daughter Kristen, of course, she and her husband both working as lawyers, and together, this family has just made me so proud of all of what they do and the way they do it, and I'm so fortunate to be part of that. I learn more from the people around me, my family, the secretarial staff, the teaching staff, the students. I learn more on a regular daily basis than I could possibly hope to give back to anybody. So thank you all for the moment you've taken out of your life to come and make my day in life very, very special. I really appreciate it, and I love you all, one and all. Thanks very much.
Art, you've justly received a lot of thank yous, and you will receive a lot more in the coming days. I don't know that it's possible in some ways to sum up the contributions that you've made over the years to education, but I'll add my thank you to that and the time that I was grateful for overlapping with you here at CCHS. Thank you all for coming to this tribute to Art, and please stay and mingle with yourselves, enjoy the refreshments, have a piece of that cake or a cookie, and catch some time with Art.